Shalom everyone, welcome back to another video of Hebrew in Israel with Yoel Halevi, and today I want to discuss a very controversial passage in the book of Judges, obviously the story of Yiphtach and his daughter, which everyone discusses and argues, and no one has really come to a final conclusion regarding what actually happened because the end of the story is very ambiguous. So what I want to actually do is talk about the oath itself that Yiphtach takes, because the oath is probably the key to understanding what happens later. I think, and this is just my thought, I think that because the story itself ends in such a horrific way, that there's a desire in the story itself, in the ending of the story, to avoid an explicit statement that Yiphtach actually killed his daughter. And this is what's led to the debate that's been around for a very, very long time over what actually happened. And though we already see the text of the oath in front of us, there's a few things I want to say before we even touch on this. Number one, the difference in cultural referencing. This is not the life-affirming monotheistic Judaism that most people are used to. Every time people discuss this topic, they literally discuss it from that prism. And that is an incorrect way to approach this. Yiphtach is an unruly, almost barbaric type of character that lives in no man's land, surrounded by people who are basically the scum of society of their time, the Bnei Belial, the lawless people. And his behavior is clearly, at least in my opinion, clearly influenced by that reality, which means that we do not need to expect him to behave in what we would perceive as normal human behavior. The other side of this as well is that Yiphtach is technically the last judge in the proper manner. Shimshon, Samson, is a bit complicated. Actually, my thesis that I wrote for my master's thesis deals with this partially, and I do have a recording called What is a Judge, which you can listen to. It should be on my Patreon and I think also my website, and where I discuss the problem of what judges are and so on. Shimshon is placed as a judge out of a sort of necessity of the period. He's not really a judge per se. He's made into a judge. He's more of an individual acting by his own accord, while other judges usually act for other people. Yiphtach is technically the last judge. He's basically the end of the book. And everything after that is like the appendix of the book of Judges. And you have to think of the end of the story of Yiphtach's daughter in context of the last story in the book of Judges, where the wife or the concubine of the Levite is murdered, and her husband tears up her body and scatters her body around the tribes of Israel. Both have very, very tragic endings. I also put out an article that discusses the parallels between the daughter of Yiphtach and the daughter of Keret, where the concept of lamenting life potential is a sign of someone dying. I think there's ample evidence that someone died here. It's also important to point, and this relates directly to our description here, is that oaths in the ancient world were taken very seriously, and there was no such thing as annulling an oath. Okay, if you go through the Bible, every time oaths are mentioned, they're taken in the name of God, and they are to be fulfilled to a point where it says in, I think it's Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, I think it's chapter 4, where he said it's better that you don't oath than you oath and not pay. Oaths were taken oaths and vows, actually, because the concept between oath and a vow is a little bit ambiguous. There are places where I think the Numbers doesn't really completely differentiate between the two, but a neder is to say something in the future, while a shvu'ah, an oath, is taking an oath about something in the past. Neder, vowing, is to the future, oath is about the affirmation of something happened in the past. And this is why paying attention to the exact wording of what Yiphtach says here is paramount to understanding what happens. So we're going to look at verses 30 and 31. So the beginning is Vayidar Yiphtach neder la'Adonai vayomar. So first of all, interesting thing is that a vow is always neder la'Adonai. Yiphtach vowed to the Lord and said. Neder la'Adonai means that technically the person is invoking the name of God. This is a vow taken by saying the name. Because there's a tendency to sometimes skip this part, the statement of speaking to the Lord, saying, is not mentioned in the text. This is actually quite normal if you go through the most oaths that we know of in the Bible. The name of God is not necessarily invoked. Here it's implied. So this is a shortened form of the statement, even though the conditions of the oath actually appear here. But there are places where, for example, someone says "Bi nishbati," or someone saying some kind of "as I live." Bi nishbati usually means bi is in myself. Nishbati, I oath, which usually means a person oaths by his own living, by his own essence of existence, and then taking the vow itself, usually invoking the name. Their classic form is Chai Adonai, or Chai Yud Hei Vav Hei. This is an oath form which appears in letters, for example, from Lachish, written as one word, by the way. So the Chai, the Yud of Chai, and the Yud of the name are actually merged with one Yud. So it's Chet Yud Hei Vav Hei. And this also probably was a way of actually speaking. Usually letters like this were written in the common language, which means this was everyday language. So usually what a person would do is they would speak, and the scribe will write down everything the person says. This has been proven because we have letters which kind of rumble on and so on. So here we have a shortened form where we don't have the invocation itself. This is a classic way of describing an oath. And an oath is built from a conditional clause and then the if and then statements. So the if starts with im naton titen et bnei amon beyadi. Okay? Now, what's interesting here is that the oath itself is built from two sections. So we have, actually 3 sections, but 2. We have this part of the condition, and then this part of the condition. He's very careful with his words, okay? And this is why it's so important. He starts with im naton titen bnei amon beyadi. Okay, if you will surely place the children of Ammon in my hand. Natan bayad, okay, given into the hand is an idiomatic expression which means to conquer, defeat, own, things like that. So he says, if you give the sons of Ammon in my hand, if you allow me to defeat them. Then he goes into the next part of the oath. So truthfully, I would even feel more comfortable breaking down the structure like this, because it's A, B, B. So we have basically a type of parallel structure. There's lots of different parallels that exist. Very commonly in the last couple of years, people talk about chiastic parallels and so on. That's one out of multiple types of parallels that exist. This is when people ask me, students will ask me, people turn around, oh, is this a chiastic? I say, well, it's a chiastic plus a whole bunch of other things. This is called a synonymous parallel, where the limbs parallel one another. So beginning of limb, middle, beginning, middle. So A, B, B. Okay? And then he puts in part of the oath, and he says, V'haya hayotze asher yitze midalte v'ti likrati. There's a reason I put this in this annoying color, because it really is the most annoying part of the statement. So he says, and it will be, okay, that which comes out, okay. The hayotze here is known as an anonymous subject or anonymous object. Here it's really the subject, but it'll be the object of it's the object of the oath, but in the statement itself it's a subject. And this is called an anonymous subject or an anonymous object, usually presented by a Hebrew participle. If you ever see a verb with a hey in front of it, a definite article in front of it, it's a participle. Participles sit between nouns and verbs, something that you can look up in grammar books. And he points out hayotze asher yetze, the one who comes out, which will come out. That's the literal translation. What this actually means is that the person, the anonymous person, is marked by the action that they do, and then they do the actual action. This is a classic form of using participles in biblical Hebrew. Now, the reason I marked this in this weird yellow thing, okay, I'm trying to make it a little bit bigger, is because I want this to really stick out. And he points out, midalte veti likrati. This is the heinous part of the oath. He states that which comes out. So far, anything can come out, okay? But comes out from the doors of my house towards me. This statement is so insidious that I think most people look over this. And I've spoken about this in the past, but this is really the crux of things, which will come out from the doors of my house. What do you think, a goat or a sheep or a cattle is going to literally walk out of the door of his house? No. Animals were kept in a pen. Even if the pen was a section within the house itself, because there's a bit of a debate that I've seen if pens if animals were kept literally in the house or in a pen outside the house. Reality is people didn't sleep inside their houses with their animals, maybe with dogs, but not with goats and so on. Even if the family pen was part of the house structure, it was still a separate structure. This is to literally come out the house. He is literally referring to a human being. There is no question about it. Yiphtach knows clearly that his statement is referring to a human being. Beiti means my house. I have something to say about this word. I'll get to it in a second. Likrati. In biblical Hebrew, when something or someone moves likrat someone, towards someone, most of the time the reference is to a human being. And to me, this one, Beiti, if you actually stop and think for a second, if you know biblical Hebrew, Beiti sounds like Biti, my daughter. Beti, if you use certain types of spelling, for example, if you remove the yud, as they may have done in antiquity, or even both yuds would be removed. Now that we've talked about this, I can put this back in black. Okay. If you were thinking about a text without the vowel consonants, okay, which was the way people used to write in the past, and you don't have vowel points, this can literally be read as the word bat, which means daughter. And this is why these three words are so insidious. There's a very thick hint here. This was his intention to begin with. And that's dark, in my opinion. And then next to it he says, Beshuvi v'shalomi b'nei Ammon. When I return in peace from the sons of Ammon. Why is it placed here and not here? Why wouldn't it be Im naton titen b'nei Ammon bi'adi, and then Beshuvi v'shalomi b'nei Ammon v'haya yotze? Why is the oath separated like this? Why don't we have the if together and then the then together? Because this creates a parallel, a life for a life. I return living, I give someone else's life. This is why the oath is structured like this. And he says, V'haya la'Adonai va'alitiu olah. He says, and they will be to the Lord. Well, that can mean anything. And he clarifies, Ve'alitihu olah. I will offer them as an olah. Olah never means anything but an actual sacrifice. The sacrilegious principle sitting in this description is gobsmacking. Anyone who reads this correctly, as I just presented, should be absolutely shocked by Yiphtach's characteristics. Yiphtach is presented in Jewish literature as the bottom of the barrel of judges. He is a depiction of how leadership at the time was absolutely corrupt. And as leadership, he's parallel to the behavior of the tribes at the end of the book as well. This entire thing is dark, beyond dark. To protect himself, he's willing to do human sacrifice. To protect the people, he's willing to do human sacrifice. He's offering something which is forbidden. This is an absolute taboo in Israelite law. But in the general population of the time surrounding the Israelites and maybe in the Israelites themselves, this may have actually been more common than we realize, because there is a concept of popular religion versus institutionalized religion, which is a very central part of the work I did on my thesis. The Nazarite oath was a popular thing, and it gets codified under priestly law. Yiphtach doesn't care about what a priest might say about this, what a prophet might say about this. He opens his mouth to God, and he has to do this. This is a very good representation of popular law. They know you're supposed to oath in the name of God. An oath can never be taken away. These are all things which are shared by other cultures as well. But the details of the oath itself are against Torah law. And that's a very, very central part. Yiphtach is not a representation of a good person, or a person who actually cares about law or cares about decency. Yiphtach is the bottom of the barrel. And this is why in rabbinic literature they talk about Yiphtach being the worst. That he is what the generation was deserving, that the generation was a bad generation, therefore they got a bad judge. This wasn't pulled out of thin air. Yeah, sure, you can start arguing and so on. Did he sacrifice her or not because of the ambiguous language at the end? But she says to him, do that which you're oath to do, that which you're vowed to do. There's no question about it. Here, there's no question about what he actually means. Literally, no question whatsoever. So I hope this clarifies what the intentions are. It is very dark. It is a very dark piece of literature, part of Israelite history, and it's something that's presented to us to warn us. People can be corrupted in a way that's unimaginable. And Yiphtach is an example of that. Thank you for joining me. Have a blessed time, a blessed week. Kol Tov.